Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the GSA Annual Scientific Meeting iSession on New Developments, Stress, Cognition, and Minority Health. We're so happy that you are here to join us today. And we have a few housekeeping items that we'll go through. But first, we would just love it if you would introduce yourself. If you're joining us today in the chat, go ahead and type your name, maybe where you're from. We would love to know who's here and joining in this conversation with us today. We will also use the chat box throughout the program, so please make any comments or ask any questions throughout the program. I will be monitoring that along with my co-coordinator, Pilar, and we'll make sure that we bring any questions and comments in at the end in our open question and answer session. Just so you know, our program is being recorded today and will be archived on the GSA website. We ask you to please keep your video off and audio on mute until it's time for our discussions at the end of the session. So a question and answer session will be immediately following our live presentations. I'd also like to now introduce myself after I've introduced our session. My name is Amanda Leggett, and I'm an assistant professor in the Institute of Gerontology and Department of Psychology at Wayne State University. And now I would like to pass the microphone, if you will, to my co-moderator, Pilar.
Hello, everyone. My name is Pilar. I'm currently a doctoral student in clinical psychology at the University of Kansas. So today's iSession is part of a series planned by a GSA program, publications, and product committee work group to provide participants with a forum for conversation on findings, limitations, future work, and advances around an interdisciplinary topic. Without further delay, I'll hand the microphone to our co-chairs of today's session, Toni Antonucci, a research professor at the University of Michigan, and Laura Zahodne, the associate professor at the University of Michigan as well.
Well, thank you so much, Amanda and Pilar. Let me share my screen now. All right, so welcome everyone to this session, which addresses issues surrounding Alzheimer's disease and related dementias across multiple racial ethnic minority groups, including Latinos, Arab Americans, and African Americans. So this session was organized around our original 2021 GSA Symposium, which was organized by the Michigan Center for Contextual Factors in Alzheimer's Disease, or MCFAD. I'm Laura Zahodne, and I'm co-director of MCFAD, along with the co-chair of today's session, Toni Antonucci, as well as Christine Ajrouche. So just to tell you a little bit about MCFAD, we are an NIA-funded resource center for minority aging research. I'm delighted to announce that as of just this week, MCFAD was renewed for a second 5-year cycle. So we're really excited about continuing our community outreach activities and our research workforce development activities into the future. So the long-term goal of MCFAD is and continues to be to eliminate racial and ethnic inequalities in ADRD through research, through mentorship, community links, and diversification of the research workforce dedicated to behavioral and social science research in ADRD. So in addition to our community outreach activities, MCFAD coordinates a variety of research and education activities, including an enrichment program for faculty and postdocs that all of today's presenters have participated in. So this is a competitive program that recruits 3 scholars a year and provides pilot funding, interdisciplinary mentorship, analytic consultation, a monthly seminar series, as well as interactions with the larger RICMAR network of centers across the US. So to let you know, applications for this program will be due in January, and I really encourage you to go to MCFAD's website, which is at the bottom right here, mcfad.isr.umich.edu, for more information about that program. Another program that might interest folks is our summer data immersion program at the University of Michigan. This is a summer program that brings together diverse scholars from all over the country to initiate new interdisciplinary research networks via small groups that work together intensely over 4 days to analyze data, and to initiate collaborative manuscripts. So through this program, participants gain access to curated data sets and didactics from the very researchers who design and administer a lot of the major national research studies on aging, like the Health and Retirement Study. So applications for this program are typically due in February. The theme of the 2024 program looks like it will relate to life course contexts and ADRD risk, and it will take place May 20th to May 23rd in Ann Arbor, Michigan. So again, please check out our website for more information about that program as well. I'm going to hand it over now to my co-chair, Dr. Toni Antonucci, to introduce our panel of speakers for today.
Thank you, Laura. We're very happy to be able to present I'm happy to introduce you to our presenters, but also to give you a little snapshot of the kind of work that we do and support with McFadden. So our first speaker will be Erica Diminich, who is going to talk to us about immigration-related trauma associated with metabolic risk and cognition in undocumented Hispanic and Latino immigrant populations at midlife. Probably a hint would be shorter titles. It would be a good thing. Elizabeth Munoz is going to speak to us about her study on psychosocial stress profiles and cognitive function in a racially and ethnically diverse study of adults. I should have mentioned that she's at the University of Texas at Austin, and Erica's sort of at Stony Brook, but she'll give you a little more detail about that. Then comes Tiffany Kindratt, who is at the University of Texas at Arlington. She's going to speak to us, tell us about her work on disparities in cognition among U.S. and foreign-born minority populations with and without diabetes. And then finally, Sandra Arevalo is at Cal State Long Beach and will talk to us about her results from her longitudinal study of older Puerto Rican adults. Erica, are you there to take it away? We were getting emails saying Erica was not quite ready or was stuck somewhere. So I think, no, she's not on, is she?
Yeah, Liz is up next. Maybe we can start with Liz.
Liz, would you mind taking over?
Yes, Erica says she's here, so I don't know.
She is here?
Yes, she's here.
She's just
swapping laptops.
She's doing what?
Oh, she's switching laptops. I'm happy to present and to give her time to connect.
That's probably a good idea because we're very tight on time.
Awesome.
And I'm going to give you the hook sign at 7 minutes. You can have between 5 and 7 minutes. So I'll just give you the 1 minute warning at 7.
Okay,
Take it away.
sounds good.
Thank you, Liz.
You can see my screen with my slides. I'm assuming.
Yes.
A big slide. Okay, cool. Well, thank you. I'm happy to kind of provide an update based on a previous presentation I gave in 2021 entitled Psychosocial Stress Profiles and Cognitive Function in Racially and Ethnically Diverse Adults. Have no disclosures. So I won't go over the whole rationale for this, as some of you probably already saw the presentation, but essentially our goal was to evaluate the multidimensionality of stress exposure and the possible unique experience of racial and ethnic minoritized adults. And so the aim of our study was to identify unique multi-domain profiles of stress. And after that, we wanted to examine if there were race-ethnic differences in stress profile membership and investigate how these profiles were associated with cognitive function. So to address our aims, we used data from the ESCAPE study, which is a study of adults living in Bronx, New York, in a neighborhood called Co-op City. Our analyses comprised of 256 adults between 25 and 65 years of age. Mostly, the large proportion was non-Hispanic Black, followed by Latino, Latinx participants. So we used basically all of the stress measures we had in this study. We had about 10 variables that were put into our models. We looked at early life adversity, daily and lifetime discrimination, neighborhood stress, financial hardship, work-related, health-related, and interpersonal relationship stress. And our outcome, we had 3 domains of functioning. We had perceptual speed, working memory, and episodic memory. Okay, so our first step was to identify profiles of stress exposure. So we fit a latent profile analysis, or LPA, and based on our modeling, we found that we had 4 classes, or the 4-class solution was the best fit for our data. And I'll describe them in detail right now. So we had profiles that were characterized by high neighborhood stress. So individuals who tended to report higher levels of stress compared to everyone else. So that was one profile. Another profile was one that was kind of in the middle, the moderate work and daily discrimination profile. Then we had the high health and relationship stress profile. And lastly, we had the high work and daily discrimination profile. Interestingly, we didn't find differences by race and ethnicity. And one of the things that I wondered was because of the type of sample that we had, and it would be interesting to see if this would be replicated in other studies. But we had differences in group membership or profile membership by age, income, and employment status. So we found that the high work and daily discrimination profile, for example, was the youngest, and they were also most likely to be employed, which makes sense because if you're employed, you're more likely to be exposed to work-related stress and discrimination potentially for our sample. Then we had the high health and relationship stress profile, which was the oldest and the lowest income. Lastly, or another interesting finding we had was that the high neighborhood stress profile was the one with the highest income. And this kind of went along with the recent finding at that time in 2021 that Amy Theory and colleagues reported using data from the HRS. They found that those with higher SCS reported more neighborhood-related stress. And this is possibly due to possibly a perceived mismatch between a person's financial means and the neighborhoods that they live in. So we thought that was interesting. Next, we wanted to see if these profiles were associated with cognitive task performance. The only overall significant difference that we found was for working memory. And then looking at the individual comparisons, we found that the moderate work and daily discrimination profile had the lower cognitive function or lower working memory performance than the high work and daily discrimination profile. So overall, we found that experiences of stress among this urban dwelling adult sample were idiosyncratic, and we found 4 stress profiles. We didn't find any racial and ethnic differences, and I'm happy to talk more about why that might be. We did find that combinations of the stress profiles possibly reflected individuals' stage in their lives, in their development, income, and employment status. And we saw that these combinations might matter for working memory performance. And ultimately, the results highlighted cumulative influence of different psychosocial stressors potentially on cognitive function. Subsequent to this 2021 presentation, and based on evidence from this study, but then also other studies showing that stressors related to being socioeconomically disadvantaged or occupying a racial and ethnic minoritized identity, my new developing research takes more of a within group approach and specifically focused on Latino, Latinx individuals and examining the role of discrimination and other contextual stressors. So we have found subsequent to 2021 that higher levels of ethnic discrimination are associated with poor cognitive performance in Mexican origin individuals. And we also, in a longitudinal prospective study, we found that ethnic and daily discrimination were prospectively associated with poor executive function, and that this was through increased depressive symptoms in Mexican origin women. We also found that this association varied by financial strain. So those with low financial strain, among those with low financial strain, higher levels of daily discrimination were actually associated with better executive function. And so this result may indicate that under unfavorable financial circumstances, unpredictable exposure to discrimination may actually activate a threat response that elevates alertness and results in faster response times. And this was a 5-year study, so we're interested to see how this looks over time. And then we also have a community-based sample that we're collecting using a new grant by NIA, focused on Mexican origin adults in Austin. And we're doing a daily diary ecological momentary assessment, looking at different domains of stressors as well, and linking that with cognition in the moment and across days. So I want to acknowledge McFadden and NIA for funding this research. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. Great job. Erica, can you take over now?
I think we can go to Tiffany next and give Erica a bit more time.
Okay, good idea. Erica, we're going to make you last. Tiffany, take it away.
All righty. Let's go ahead and do my slideshow here and flip the slideshow. Okay. So this is an update on my presentation on disparities in cognition among foreign-born minority populations with and without diabetes. So the presentation was available for you, but just in case you didn't have a chance to watch it, I gave a brief overview on this slide. So a recap of the findings from that slide actually, a recap of our specific aims were actually to estimate and compare the prevalence of cognitive limitations among Arab American immigrants compared to U.S. and foreign-born non-Hispanic whites before and after adjusting for contributing factors. And then among those with cognitive limitations, we looked at the prevalence of diabetes among that population. We focused the results on the Arab American group compared to U.S. and foreign-born whites only for the presentation, mainly due to the fact that Arab Americans are considered white by the U.S. government on the census and other federal forms, along with individuals from European origin. So the methods used were 2000 to 2017 National Health Interview Survey data, as well as 2001 to 2018 Medical Expenditure Panel Survey data. So we linked these data. It was restricted, and the sample was limited to ages 45 and older. So there were some challenges getting the data originally and reviewing the outputs in a timely manner. I had to go and analyze the data and then wait for them to review it and send it back to me, and just, scheduling time to actually go to the center. So the main findings from the original study were that Arab American immigrants had a higher prevalence of cognitive limitations only. Also, among those with cognitive limitations, they had a higher prevalence of diabetes compared to US-born whites. Among foreign-born whites, the pattern was a little bit different. There was a lower prevalence of cognitive limitations only among Arab Americans compared to foreign-born whites, but it was a higher prevalence among when they had diabetes. Sorry there, that was a mouthful. But bottom line, there were no statistically significant differences that we found in our logistic regression models. So what happened next? So we submitted this paper to the special issue for the Journal of Aging and Health, and based on the feedback that we received, we decided to limit our sample to adults ages 65 and older and focus on cognitive limitations only. When we made that sample 65 and older, it was too small really to focus on that group with diabetes. There were too few among that foreign-born Middle Eastern immigrant population that had both cognitive limitations and diabetes. And since it was restricted data, they didn't recommend that we used it. Also, we broadened the sample to include both Middle Eastern and North African immigrants based on some of the proposals that now are in effect by the U.S. Census Bureau to include a separate checkbox for this population separated from whites. And so we found the prevalence of cognitive limitations among MENA immigrants was higher than both US and foreign-born non-Hispanic whites from Europe. And then when we did our regression models, we found a similar finding, except for we adjusted for risk factors across the life course in that model. So we found MENA immigrants had 1.88 times higher odds of a cognitive limitation compared to US-born whites after adjusting for those factors. But then we didn't just drop our data looking at diabetes. We decided to actually look at it among US and foreign-born white, Hispanic, and Black populations. And we looked at those populations aged 65 and older. We compared those populations to US-born whites as the majority population, and then also looked at each of US and foreign-born comparison. So we were really looking at the immigrant health paradox there. And we found that prevalence of coexisting diabetes overall among older adults with cognitive limitations was 30.3%, which was similar to other research studies. Then among older adults with cognitive limitations, and after adjusting for risk factors for both cognitive limitations as well as diabetes, there were differences in all of the groups and US-born whites. However, there were no differences between, say, foreign-born Hispanic and US-born Hispanic, foreign-born Black and US-born Black, or foreign-born white and US-born white counterparts. So what are we doing now? So along with when I received the funding for McFadden, it was around the same time that I received an R03. And the purpose of the R03 was to look at undiagnosed and diagnosed Alzheimer's disease and related dementia among MENA individuals compared to other racial and ethnic groups. So we recently published a paper in the Journal of Immigrant and Minority Health on suspected undiagnosed ADRD among older adults, and found that that was much higher among MENA immigrants compared to US and foreign-born whites. Now, we had a similar problem because of the diagnostic codes that we used, and this sample is only limited to foreign-born MENA individuals. We really couldn't do much with the diagnosed ADRD sample for MENA. And so my co-authors and I came up with an idea to look at ADRD risk factors among MENA adults compared to US and foreign-born whites. And so we looked at all of those risk factors that Livingston put together in their flagship paper, and looked at how those differed. And so that paper is under review right now, and it was submitted to Preventive Medicine a couple weeks ago. And I presented it at the Society for Epidemiologic Research in June. So, but again, didn't want to scrap that comparison for other racial and ethnic groups of diagnosed ADRD. And so I'm working on the manuscript for those results right now, and that will be presented at GSA on Friday, November 10th.
1 minute.
So what comes next? So part of working and doing research on the MENA population is part of the argument is that by including MENA as whites, it's actually making the health disparities inaccurate, or that they may be different for other groups, say Blacks and Hispanics compared to whites, because they're diluting that disparity. And so part of what I'm going to do on my next research grant through CAPRA is to remove them from the white classification and see if it makes any difference. I also want to add Texas to the mix as the third highest MENA population in the US, since most research is done in California and Michigan. And then future after that, you know, we'll see. I work in a kinesiology department, and so I'm really interested in not only looking at racial and ethnic disparities with nativity, but also starting to lean towards looking into movement and sleep, physical activity, and sedentary behavior, and how that relates to cognition. And those are my acknowledgements. The data were analyzed for all of these studies at the Dallas-Fort Worth Statistical Research Data Center, and the funding's there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sandra, take it away. And you are on mute, but I'm sure you're unmuting yourself.
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
Press the wrong button. Okay. Okay, let me minimize this window.
Yes.
Okay. So during the last presentation, I presented some preliminary analysis that I was working on using a longitudinal cohort of older Puerto Ricans living in the East Coast. And we examine associations between sleep and cognition. We know that sleep is highly affected by stress levels. So we decided to go with the sleep, examining the association with sleep first. Let me see. I'm trying to move my slide. Okay. And briefly, the specific aims of this analysis were just to examine this association, sleep cognition association. We have found the literature give us evidence of this association, but most of these results are focused on white older adults, and minoritized groups are not frequently included. So we decided to let me see. My phone is ringing. Sorry. So we were motivated by that to do this analysis, and we examined both cross-sectional and prospective associations of sleep using subjective measurements of sleep and a very complex battery of cognitive measurements. This is in a cohort of older Latino adults. This is a data set that baseline was collected between 2004 and 2009. It includes about 1,500 participants, older Puerto Rican adults between the ages of 45 and 75. And we included in this analysis an ancillary study that was focused on bone, because this study had the sleep data we needed for this analysis. So, merging wave 2 and wave 4 with the ancillary bone data restricted our final sample size significantly. So even though wave 2 and wave 4 had 1,258 participants and 573 respectively, our sample includes only 952 participants at wave 2 and 444 at wave 4. And we are comparing the effect of sleep in wave 2 on cognition on wave 4. In addition to this, we also wanted to take account of the intersectionality experience of minoritized groups. So we assessed the moderating effect of age and sex in these associations. And we found in the cross-sectional and longitudinal models, sleep was not significantly associated with cognition after controlling for all of our covariates. However, the interactions were statistically significant, showing interesting results. The graph on the top, it shows the association between sleep duration, which we categorize in 3, less than 7 hours, the reference 7 hours, and 8 hours or more. And we found that in this, we divided the age groups less than 65 and greater than 65. And we found that older Puerto Rican adults, they were the ones experiencing worse in the sleep duration was affecting older Puerto Rican adults. We see this graph here. The blue line represent older men, and the association between sleep duration and cognition show inverted U shape with worse global cognition scores in those who sleep 8 hours or longer. In relation to insomnia symptoms, we found that, again, older Puerto Ricans had worse memory outcomes for those who reported higher insomnia symptoms. And these associations were not seen in any other group. It was older Puerto Rican adults. We submitted this manuscript to the Journal of Gerontology, the Biological and Medical Sciences, and it was accepted. The only thing they asked us later was because of the smaller sample size and because we were doing interactions, they asked us to do some multiple imputation, and the results were similar after that. But given this association, we wanted to see how stress levels were affecting the sleep in this population. So we followed that study with examining the effect of stress on sleep in Puerto Ricans, in this cohort of Puerto Ricans. And we again, we wanted to acknowledge the intersectionality experiences. We did the interactions by sex and age, and we also used multidimensional measures of stress. We had allostatic load, capturing the biological effects of stress. We had subjective stress. We have lifetime events capturing the life course effects of stress over the life course. So we have multidimensional measurements of stress. And we found not all of the stressors were associated with sleep in our sample. And again, we found older Puerto Ricans were vulnerable to the effects of stress on sleep. We see here the only stressor that we found significantly associated with sleep was life events. We have
1 minute.
1 minute. Okay. So we found a similar pattern here of vulnerability. Based on this work, as a part of my McFadden's experience, I additionally collected data from college students to assess their cognitive associations between stress and cognition. One of the barriers of doing research when you are part of an intensive teaching institution is that you have to use the tools you have available. So I'm working with students now. We created the Stress and Health Equity Lab, and we're working with students, collecting data, spreading the word about the association between stress and brain. And the experience so far has been very rewarding. I have obtained internal funding from my institution, and we are now doing a pilot study to examine ecological momentary assessments of stress and cognition in college students. Let's see. I think, yeah, I'll go lastly to the acknowledgements. Much of my time has been supported by the grant from McFadden, and the content here is my sole responsibility. And of course, go Beach. Thank you.
All righty. Thank you, Sandra. Erica, are you prepared?
I am ready. Yep.
Okay.
1 second. Okay. All right, can everyone hear me and see my screen?
Yes.
Great, thank you. Before I start, just briefly, I do just want to say that the work that I presented in 2021 and the updates that I'm going to be giving today would not have been possible had it not been for pilot funding from the McFAD, the NIA-funded McFAD, and the training and the mentorship that I had, which allowed me to grow and I believe continue this cohort. So I really encourage those of you who have not applied, you should apply, and I'm happy to share materials or answer any questions that you might have during that application process. Okay, so that was my plug for McFAD, which was, I think, instrumental in this work. Oops, okay, so just as a refresher to those of you who might not have seen the 2021 recording. So in my work, I was really interested in understanding why certain Hispanic Latino populations had increased risk for mild cognitive impairment and Alzheimer's disease and related dementias. I was particularly interested in understanding if it was possible to actually identify the earliest markers of neuropathology. So I was really interested in these blood-based biomarkers and also interested in the idea of testing these out in a non-clinical population of adults at midlife. So with that, I developed a research in the community. So I partnered with a church in a growing migrant neighborhood in rural Long Island, about 30-40 minutes away from Stony Brook. And in 2020, I started this cohort after some successful pilot data from my McFAD. So just a recap of this cohort. The cohort is has about a median age of about 46. It is a very diverse Hispanic Latino cohort. Most are from Central America, but what's nice about that is that Central American populations are really the least, or they're the most underreported, I would think broadly in the literature. So it's kind of great that now we get to get some new data to understand a little bit more about the different Hispanic Latino groups. Okay, and also I think importantly about 67% of this population does not have health insurance, and the median age of migration to the US is about 11 years. And it's got a pretty even distribution of males and females. And if you're interested, of course, you can see the recording or you can reach out to me directly and I'll be happy to share more information. So some research questions. The specific aims from the 2021 was I was interested in understanding relationships between metabolic syndrome with post-traumatic stress disorder and depressive symptoms, anxiety symptoms. There's great literature that shows that, you know, higher exposure to post-traumatic stress is also associated with greater risk for metabolic dysregulation and poor cardiometabolic health, and also cortical thinning. So it's, you know, higher risk of mild cognitive impairment and neuropathology. So what we found, and this was really some kind of preliminary work back in at the end of wave 1 of data collection, because I should say that this is what I presented in 2021 was the first study visit from a longitudinal study, which I'm excited to give you updates about that was funded by the Alzheimer's Association. So again, it was how I continued to grow my McFAD study. So the main findings were not that surprising and really kind of consistent with what we already know in the literature. So 39% of our population, of our study population, and this data here is based on 175 individuals. So 39% had metabolic syndrome. Metabolic syndrome was more prevalent in males relative to females. Higher number of metabolic symptoms were also associated with poorer scores on tasks of working memory, lower scores on tasks of language. And metabolic syndrome was also associated with higher scores on anxiety symptoms. when we looked at pre-migration trauma, and that was basically, it's a 2-item question where individuals reported whether or not they had experienced any trauma back in their countries of origin prior to migrating, and 2, if they migrated, if during the process of migration they experienced any threats of life, to themselves or to family members. So what we found, again, which is what we expected, was that for those who endorsed pre-migration trauma, there were higher symptoms of depression, greater symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder, and those were associated with lower scores on working memory, which in non-Latino populations in the PTSD literature, this is a pretty consistent and known finding. Okay, so progression of work with this cohort, and this is where it gets really exciting, given that it's a community-based cohort. It's incredibly challenging work, but it has been incredibly rewarding. So we started data collection 2 months after the November 2021 talk here. So I'm just going to kind of let's go forward a little bit. So we started data collection for visit 2 a couple of months after the GSA talk. We had a 92.3% retention rate. We lost very few individuals. Everybody came back. I should say that they're on site. We draw blood, we do anthropometrics, we do cognitive assessments, since those are one of our main outcomes, using the NIH toolbox. Participants fill out these questionnaires. They give us a great deal of clinical information and self-report information about their experiences. The one thing that we incorporated into our visit 2, because we thought it was incredibly important, especially as we were trying to understand some of these findings, some of which were not necessarily expected, and those papers are under review, and I'm happy to share those broadly once those are accepted. But what we found is that we weren't really asking the right questions in visit 1. We incorporated then in visit 2 questions that were really more specific in asking about not just pre-migration experiences, but also post-migration stressors. So how were these structural and systemic factors that people were experiencing, how are those influencing health outcomes? And I think I had a spoiler alert here because we're now doing visit 3. Which we just
Erica, you have 1 more minute.
Okay, 1 more minute. Visit 3, so exciting, so exciting. So visit 2, the big story is plasma biomarkers. They definitely are associated with domain-specific cognitive performance in this cohort in the directions that they should be. That's really super exciting. It led us then to go into visit 3, and in addition to looking at these additional kind of structural factors, we collected ApoE data. 70% of our visits are done already. Again, we have lost very few people, so we're finishing probably, it looks like, with about a 91% retention rate. Papers are forthcoming. Plasma-based biomarkers are super, super, super exciting. The genotype data with this group really is interesting, given the diversity of the population. So I look forward to answering any other questions. Thank you.
Welcome.
All right. Some of these slides will be shared because there are a few exciting things here. And this is from one of the papers that's under review when we looked at predictors of health outcomes, which followed from wave 2. All right, but you guys all have access to these slides and I'm happy to follow up with those questions.
Okie doke.
Acknowledgements. Sorry, Toni.
Amanda, take it away.
Yeah, thank you so much, Erica, and all of our panelists. That was fabulous. So just as a reminder for everyone, we are recording this session and we'll send you an access link by email once the recording is available. But now we'll move into our question and answer session. So please just remember you can type and send questions using the chat box, and we'll do our best to facilitate as many questions as possible, time permitting, during this last part of our program. So to kick things off, I just thought I would start with a question for our panelists. And some of you kind of made some comments to this extent, but I'm curious in this area of work in terms of cognition and thinking about race and ethnicity and intersectionality here, what would you say have been some of the biggest barriers or challenges you faced in this line of research?
Happy to kick that off because it addresses some reviewer concerns that I was addressing. I think that one of the biggest challenges that I have encountered in addition to just, I think, the time management piece of building work like this, and also the need to, because we're all good researchers and we all have these well thought out questions, but I think that, you know, we need to be flexible. We need to kind of go back to things when things don't make sense to make sure we really understand what we're talking about and the data that we have. But I really think that one of the biggest challenges that I'm seeing now with a few papers under review is pushback when findings are unexpected. So this idea that how can this population be this healthy, or what else? Sorry, I'm in the midst of a transition, so I have boxes everywhere and I just knocked something over. You know, are we sure? Did you double check this? Can you rerun these sensitivity analyses? Almost like not wanting there to be this narrative that resilience might be this underlying factor in certain areas. So I think that sometimes presenting data that doesn't necessarily fit the norm of expectations, that's been one of my challenges.
And to follow Erica, I think one of the reasons sometimes we find these unexpected results, you know, we may be lacking this intersectional analysis, because in my analysis, when I was doing the whole sample cross-sectional longitudinal analysis, I wasn't finding what I was expecting, what the literature was saying. But once I was able to do these interactions, you know, we saw that the association was working differently depending on the group of, you know, categorization. However, it's very difficult to do this intersectional analysis because of sample size. We are so limited by that. We want to explore all these possibilities, but we don't have the data for that. But yes, we do what we can.
I can piggyback on that based on the sample size and not having the data available. So looking at the Arab American population in the national data sources, it's not there. And you can really only look at foreign-born in the National Health Interview Survey now, and have to use the American Community Survey to look at other cognitive issues. And so hopefully that will change. But for now, we do what we can.
Yeah, and I just wanted to like echo what Erica said about publishing in this area, in looking at, when you're looking at just within group analyses, it's really hard. When you find something that's not expected. I personally found that when my sample reports low levels of discrimination, I'm happy, but the reviewers don't like that. So it's kind of interesting. But then also carrying out the research is challenging, and it's rewarding because you get to interact with the community and kind of like learn what their needs are, especially if you're taking more of a community-based participatory research approach. It's also a lot of work, and I think all of us here are early career researchers, and we don't have all of the funding, right? And the funding, we kind of just make ends meet. And, you know, obviously, if you're working with the Latino population or somebody or other populations that speak other languages, you have to do the same study twice, right? In Spanish and English. And so it's been challenging, but hopefully it'll be rewarding in the end. So.
Thank you. Thank you all for your comments. Pilar, do you want to jump in with the next question? And remember, you're welcome to type questions or comments in the chat, or even unmute yourself and jump in with a question as well.
Yeah, I'll also add, if you want to raise your hand, utilize the chat options. We'd be more than happy to get you to ask your question as well. I think this conversation is so important to have, and it's really interesting with all your works. And whenever I'm listening about these findings, I always think back about your interactions with the community members and kind of wanting to know, like, on a qualitative standpoint as well, like what are they thinking, and also just when we're thinking about racial, ethnic minorities, sort of understanding their identities on other aspects as well, or kind of how much are they familiar with their identity, how much do they resonate with it as well. And I think that's really, I don't know, something that was on my mind. But in terms of question, I would love to know sort of future directions for you all, anything you're looking forward to, whether it's directly related to your work or the field in general.
Yeah, I'm happy to kick that off. I have a letter of intent that's going in tomorrow to foundation funding, following some good talks with people at AAIC, and the quick turnaround to get some APOE data. So excited to kind of explore more, again, the utility and really the value of the prognostic value of these plasma biomarkers with this cohort. So I will be continuing this cohort, I hope, when that funding comes along and I don't have to dip into other funding. Let's say, so another area of direction is that I did accept a position at a Hispanic serving, or I should say a minority serving institution. So I am putting in NIA will be receiving what's called a First Shore grant. And those are mechanisms for researchers that are at minority serving institutions that will specifically be giving research opportunities and experiences to underrepresented students in biomedical sciences. I think that if I have learned nothing more over the past 3 years is that we absolutely need Black and Latino scientists, researchers, clinicians, social workers, neuropsychologists out there, because there are not enough. It's really something that needs to happen, and I think it has to happen at the undergraduate level. So those are 2 mechanisms that I'm pursuing, which will also allow me to grow this cohort and create one at my new institution.
Congratulations, Erica. That's really exciting.
Other people listening, now is your opportunity to ask questions of these lovely, engaged young scientists.
While we're waiting, maybe hopefully someone else will jump in. I guess I can add another follow-up question. I'm wondering, I already asked about challenges. I'm wondering if there is anything you all could share in terms of primary data collection that you do with these populations, with these samples. How do you work with these participants and get them engaged in research in the communities that you work in? If you have any thoughts on what that looks like, actually, starting a new study and making these partnerships.
Oh my gosh,
Erica.
But I feel like I have so much to say about this, but I will just very quickly say, there is no short, quick, easy way to do it. There is no, well, this person did it, so I'm going to do it exactly like them. You also do not have to look like the community you are going into. What you have to do is you have to be honest. You have to dedicate your time. You have to be authentic, and you have to demonstrate that there is a reason that you are there, and there is a benefit to that group, to that population, to that community, and you have to integrate yourself into it, which goes back to Liz's point earlier. It's a really hard thing to do as an early stage investigator. So you should try to either have somebody who is a senior PI, you can put in a supplement, something that buys out, protects your time as much as possible, because you need to dedicate the time, and papers will be slow going, and that's hard. So you need to make sure that you have a pipeline of things that you can actively put out there while you're doing this work. But it's face time, and it's really explaining to people, beyond just I'm here to collect data, this is how this can help you, and be sure that you understand that community so that you have answers at the ready and resources at the ready so that you can help them and address whatever their needs might be, putting your research needs kind of secondary.
Yeah, I have to say that I learned a lot from Erica when I started my project, because it was more about just getting out there, getting to meet the community without asking anything from them, and just kind of giving them, seeing what they needed and prioritizing their needs first, and then kind of giving them information about our research and the importance of our research, and trying to engage in that way. But a lot of the times it's mostly you go out there and you kind of just interact and do whatever it is that they need. But I think another kind of going over what covering what Pilar asked as well, one of the things that I'm thankful for and excited for is that we have kind of this in research, aging research, we now have this kind of groups or kind of setups where like RICMAR and like the P30, like McFadden, where we're able to kind of interact with other researchers that are doing similar work, and we can kind of meet and talk, and kind of like McFadden has a lot of sessions where we just kind of talk about our problems, and they have a lot of like, they provide resources and things like that, and connects us with people that can, be a resource to us. So that's what's exciting, because I think it hasn't, the recognition of community-based research is kind of growing, and it's becoming recognized as something that's important, moving beyond clinical samples in Alzheimer's research. So it's really great to kind of be at this stage in time.
I agree.
Thank you all so much. Well, we have 4 minutes left. Did anybody in the peanut gallery in the audience want to jump in with a question? Otherwise, we can wrap up.
I do just want to say, if anybody is considering applying to the McFadden, or if you want more information about it and you don't want to reach out to Laura or Toni, because that's scary sometimes, please do reach out to me. I am so happy to answer any questions and share materials. The application is as long as you have a thoughtful idea, you're halfway there. So please consider it.
Yes, thank you for that plug.
I'll piggyback on that.
I'm waiting for, I'll wait for like a little subsidy check or something.
But as part of the larger group of RICMAR, some of the participants may be part of that as well. And I'm one of the scientists on their advisory board right now. And so they will be going through some changes, but we put together a LinkedIn group. But we don't know exactly how it's going to run and how everything's done, but just to try and sort of facilitate those collaborations and partnerships with everybody across the different sites.
And one of the interesting things is that the coordinating center is moving to GSA. So it'll be
that's very interesting.
Nearer and dearer to our hearts, if you will.
Great. Well, thank you all. We look forward to seeing you at GSA. It'll be here before we know it, and hope you will attend the upcoming McFadden symposium at this GSA. Laura put the information, I believe, on that in the chat. So please check out the McFadden website for more information about the programs that have been mentioned, and we look forward to seeing everyone in a couple months at GSA.
Thank you, Amanda. Thank you, Pilar, for hosting. It was great.
Our pleasure. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.